Welcome into the Crypto Bunker podcast. Today, I want to review a few things. I want to look at Bitcoin, MicroStrategy. Yeah, taking a look at MicroStrategy just right off the bat. I'm concerned. Um, and the reason I'm concerned is if you look at a long-term chart of MicroStrategy, it's very similar to 2021. What we had is we had a blow off top. And then we made a lower high. And we did the same thing now. And on the hedge eye process, we saw that MicroStrategy flipped to neutral trend. And now it's selling off 3% today when Bitcoin's down 0.87%. I understand that it's more volatile than Bitcoin, but the chart patterns are very similar. If you look at this candle here back in 2021, versus this candle here in 2024. And now again, like this sort of rolling double top where the second top got a little bit higher. But when we saw the high that Bitcoin made this week, um, MicroStrategy didn't even get above the prior week, which is actually pretty crazy. So if we compare that to Bitcoin, um, we can see that um, obviously this week we made the highest high Bitcoin has ever made. And it really reminds me a lot of the double tops that Bitcoin always puts in. Like when we did that back here, we made a higher high, similar candle, big wick, and then we got rejected. I could easily see that here. We've had a good run since April. Um, it's not, I understand that, Bitcoiners and crypto enthusiasts like myself, we want to see this all happen at once, but unfortunately that's just not, how these things always work. And right now Bitcoin is really putting in this sort of weekly topping candle, in my opinion. Now, I could be wrong. We obviously have um, that we can bring out the moving averages and see where we could get to potentially for Bitcoin. The 20 weeks at 104. But at that point, I mean, we're getting closer to like a bearish trend here, in my opinion, based on MicroStrategy being neutral trend. The trend line obviously moves up. I would say we would probably have to break anywhere from 105 to 110 for Bitcoin to actually switch to bearish trend. But I'm just concerned that, MicroStrategy here is losing the 20 week, which is never good. And it just doesn't look healthy. It doesn't really look good. It didn't make a higher high here or here. So we have two highs for Bitcoin. The first high was around here. And then that second higher high was here. And we have, MicroStrategy going down here, just like it did in 2021, where we saw, again, this higher high put in. And then, actually, funny enough, I guess, if you look at it, we can see that, well, it was on November 8th, right? That MicroStrategy put in that lower high. And it was also the same high there as Bitcoin put in. And this time it didn't do that. It obviously didn't make that higher high here. So definitely concerning. It's sort of like an RSI reading, if you think of it that way. Like the RSI just kind of keeps getting more and more, um, lower highs and everything. Like you can look at the lower highs here in MicroStrategy. You know, this is essentially it didn't do anything for this last one. So that's kind of telling you the speculation, the fervor, the liquidity, the volume, sort of all down because, you usually during a rip roaring rally, you want that, right? But right now, to me, this kind of looks more like, again, like a lower high in the enthusiasm. We also have Ethereum, which is running hot, which is always kind of the sign of the end, right? Because Ethereum runs a little bit after Bitcoin. You can think of it that way. But what I wanted to look at real quick was volume here just to see. But yeah, we can see volume is down pretty significantly on a weekly basis. Obviously, this was the top for the volume. We look at Bitcoin, it's also down. Even at this high, it's not as high as this high, even when it went to 107. So November, December was really sort of that fervor, sort of speculation top, if you want to think of it that way. Um, and then we can see that, that Bitcoin, it did this pattern here, and we can compare patterns, but it's pretty similar. It's not going to be exact, but you can see that the pattern is pretty much very similar. We had this kind of come up here, rolling top correction, this roll here, and then, slightly higher high, and then, potential sort of sell off here that would, ultimately take us down to maybe 40K for a bear market. Bitcoin has gone through, um, and this would suck, by the way, right? Like this isn't something that I'm looking for or something that I want or anything, but um, it's just something that I'm seeing in the charts that I wanted to report. Obviously, Ethereum is a different story. So I lined up a few different things. I mean, there's a few different things I'm looking at for Ethereum here. Um, I wish that Ethereum could be uncorrelated to Bitcoin because I honestly am like, I'm not feeling the bullish nature of Bitcoin right now. You know, the volumes for ETH still aren't great. That we can't really factor in volumes as much as you used to. What I was comparing Ethereum to is the 2020 crash. And this is probably my thesis, I would say, even for Bitcoin. So before you think that I'm saying that the bull market is completely over, I actually would not say that. But I would say that the 4-year cycle is broken. And I would say that most people are looking for the 4-year cycle. I would say most people still are thinking that it's going to top this December. I think we're going to get a vicious correction here for a few months that's going to take us into like mid-October. And then we're going to see a buy again. We're not going to make higher highs this year for where we were just at. And I could see Bitcoin going to like 90K, like really shaking a lot of people out. I could see Ethereum, going down to like 3K, maybe even a little lower, 2,900, something like that. But this is kind of the pattern that ETH is putting in right now. It's very similar to 2020. We had this blow off high here, and that's kind of where I think we are in the cycle. I think that Bitcoin still hasn't really had a blow off top. Um, and if you look at it, basically we're right here, right? With Ethereum, you can see the pattern similarities. Coming off the low here, you get that sort of blow off here, and then you have a correction. And you need to come back because, as you guys know, and I've talked about for years, the moving averages. I mean, the moving averages are so important. People don't really pay attention to it as much as they should. And I'm not saying the moving averages are the be all end all, but it does tell you where are the majority of people. Where have they dollar cost average in for the last, 1, 2, 3, 4 years, right? So the 200 week is like 4 years, right? So where have people that have dollar cost average for 4 years, their price right now is 2,400. So they're up like almost 100% on that dollar cost average. You would think they'd take some profits, right? And what we need right now is we need this 20-week to get in order. I mean, right now, again, we're a little bit far away from the moving averages where we were at. So we need to sort of come back and kind of settle up a little bit, um, and get our bearings. While the 20-week, if we take the projection of the 20-week, we can see that it's going to be something like that, right? The 20 weeks going to come up. It might not go up as steep as it is now, but it's going to come across. And ETH needs to test that 20-week for a while. And then it can really start to move, right? And if we take this all the way through, we're looking at like April 2026 for that blow off sort of 30,000 potential, which I do think is possible. I'm not saying it's going to happen. Um, I think it's possible, but this could be, one of those moments where, the RSI came up really high here. It needs to chill out, needs a break. And yeah, so again, if we look, we can also look back to this time in 2020, and we can see that in 2020, we also kind of were crossing, 200 weeks and everything like that. 200 was on the top, similar to what we saw, I think, recently as well. And then we started to cross, and once we crossed the 20 and the 200, that was kind of the top. And then we had to, again, sell off for, a few months. And then, mid-October, we kind of got a bid. And I think this is also going to coincide with rate cuts that are going to come in September, October, November. And that's actually going to be bearish initially. So you're going to see a sell-off initially because September also is just not a good month for crypto. It's not a good month for Bitcoin, traditionally. So again, that's kind of where I think we're at with Ethereum. We can look at the moving averages again real quick because again, like look how the 20-week is kind of just starting to cross these moving averages, and that's usually signs of a top. And obviously the 200 was never on the top, but it was pretty close to being on the top, and it's acted as support. It's sort of acted as resistance here, but then we broke through it. Now I think we really need to come back and test some of these moving averages, which are pretty big corrections. But that's what ETH does. ETH will shake anyone out that doesn't have conviction. And then, you have to sort of factor in other things happening in the world. You have to factor in like the midterms next year. Like, are they going to want to pump the markets, or are they just going to give up completely and really try to go for the authoritarian stuff now, in 2026, in terms of like, starting World War III or doing crazy things like that because Trump's sort of all unhinged. And I do think he would do that. So, emergency powers, all the stuff that you can do when there's a war. I would be nervous a little bit about that. And so that's why I am kind of thinking the early 2026 will be the time to take profits or to top out. There's a possibility that I would take a low leverage loan on Aave when it comes and tests the 20-week. That's because that's like when, people aren't really paying attention to kind of where we're at. They think the cycle's over. That's going to be perfect because people are sort of going to be, everyone will get liquidated because everyone was getting long here. And then you can just kind of accumulate. You can just dollar cost average in. And by the time you get to the 20-week, you probably have a good stack. And if you have a big enough stack, you can take a low leverage loan where you basically won't get liquidated below like 870. Like you can go all the way, you can go lower than that even, but you could like say like, the end of the world, or something happens, you may not want to do this. But if you're not risking like a ton, you might put it like 750 because sometimes in crazy scenarios, you'll have like a lower low that will liquidate every single person that was ever involved in this, and it will just make a slightly lower low, right? So again, this is a little bit crazy talk, I get it. But just kind of a possibility there. I also wanted to kind of bring another perspective in. This really reminded me a lot And I think this is the right thing. It might not be. Here we go. No, it's not. That's the Bitcoin chart from last cycle. This is the NASDAQ, I believe it's the NASDAQ. Oh, this is from 20. Yeah, so this is the NASDAQ. It just shows like sort of what kind of corrections you can see in markets. And you can kind of see like this is like the double bottom that we needed to put in. Um, it's always like a little bit higher than the other one. This is the NASDAQ from 2000 through 2008, and then all the way through to now. Obviously, these are pretty crazy numbers, but I do think ETH can do this. I know that's, debatable or whatever, but if the Internet of Value is coming, on chain, and we are tokenizing everything and putting it, on chain and stuff like that, it's possible that this could happen. I also have another NASDAQ comparison. I don't know where it is. I think, oh, I got it. Here it is. So this is the other one, and I think this one's even more accurate. So you can see this is the NASDAQ from, I want to say this is, yeah, so it's like 1980s NASDAQ. And the NASDAQ, it did this sort of this, it was like, this is literally the beginning of the NASDAQ right here. So this is like when it first started trading. And that's kind of what I think Ethereum is. It's like so early still. There's really probably no point in even taking a low leverage loan, honestly, because it's just so early. But if you want to get some liquidity out of the cycle, like out of a rally that like goes too far, I guess that's kind of the point of doing it. But it's still something I'm debating. I'm not sure I'm going to do that. So it's not financial advice or anything to do that. But anyway, so yeah, this kind of looks similar to me, definitely here. So we have, if we zoom in a little bit, we can see, even right now, it's pretty similar. I don't think it will follow this path though. I mean, this is sort of the correction here. I think that we're going to be, it's crypto, so we're going to see sharper corrections, and we need to because of the moving averages, like I said. And then basically the NASDAQ, it took like 3,000 days or something like that. It might have been 3,500 days to get from this bottom in the 80s to the 2000 top. And so in crypto, since it trades 24/7, you have to divide by, 3 or something like that. So we end up at 1,043 days, which would put us at, February 2028. And then I think it went up like 18x. So if you want to do that, or no, sorry, I think it went up like 30x from the bottom. So obviously if you do that math, it ends up being like 50, 60,000 at the top. Now this is kind of what it looked like. Obviously it's not gonna, I mean it could, I guess, but I don't think it will get to 14 million, but you do see the similarities of, a chart pattern. And it has to be acknowledged. And it's possible that the Ethereum ecosystem is sort of like the new S&P 500 for digital tokens and value. I think there's still a lot of pain and trauma in the ecosystem that sort of can cause issues in terms of like making it very cyclical. And so, yeah, this is kind of the chart pattern that I modeled this after. But, you can see it was about 3,400 days. From that bottom to the top, it was in it was in 1990, actually, that it made that bottom. So I would say that's pretty similar to where we're at with crypto, at least with Ethereum. I would say, we might be a little bit farther along, maybe 1993, 4, 5. But with the chart pattern, I do think it's very similar. If you zoom in on it, you'll recognize it, right? I mean, we obviously just went through this where it was like, 1, 2, 3, sort of triple top, and then a crash through the floor. And this whole sort of thing was kind of like the correction pattern that we would see in Ethereum. So I did also want to bring that into the fold. I'm looking at a few other things. I like Aave, because I think Aave right now has 50, billion dollars locked. I do think, I mean, again, this is kind of these patterns, right? But this is the Nasdaq, I believe, again. So we can just see that, we're looking at sort of a cup and handle pattern here with Aave. Um, and to me, that's pretty bullish. We could come back and test 200 or something crazy, 210, 280, whatever it is. I mean, it's pretty sharp sell-off here. So um, just be aware that, again, the trend line would tell us, maybe if we got a really sharp correction, maybe we go back to like 154. That would be like a 60% correction, but that can happen. And I think it will be a bigger correction than people think it will right now, because I think that the cycle needs to be broken at the time that people are used to having it top out. So, you know, everyone will sort of be confused, and it will create a lot of opportunity for people to come in and scoop people's coins. There'll be a lot of fear. There's a lot of stuff happening with the government and sort of like saying they don't have as much Bitcoin as they said they did. And then they're like, oh no, we will accumulate Bitcoin. We're sorry. And like, it's just, it's very toppy vibes to me right now. But I don't think we're at the point of like blow off top still, for sure. And I think you can tell that through the Ethereum, moving averages, basically. I mean, it's like how skinny they are compared to where they were, at the top here. Obviously, they were, insanely, skinny there. So, or wide there, right? So they were this wide here. There's just no comparison. I mean, it's literally like an inch, not even an inch there. And then you have this whole thing here. So this is early days for the Ethereum cycle. That's pretty much all you need to know. I mean, we just had a massive correction, and now, we sprung up, and we're going to have to correct in a bullish pattern. And I think that will come, and, look for like 3,100, 3,200, 3,400 area for Ethereum, and we'll see, if it holds bullish trend in that area as well. So hopefully you got something out of the video. If you did, please like, subscribe, and have a great rest of your day. Hopefully this is not the end of the cycle. That is just the start of a correction.